Is the founder of Define American. It is a campaign that seeks to elevate the conversation around immigration in America. He is a Pulitzer-Prize award-winning journalist who came out as an undocumented immigrant in 2011. Since that time, he's been on the cover of Time magazine, testified before Congress, and also wrote a documentary film about his experiences.
I have to say, where are all the Filipinos at? Okay. It's a lot of Filipinos in one room. I have to say, when CNN aired the film this past June, and when I showed the CNN executives, including Jeff Zucker, the cut of the film, he said, has there ever been this much Filipino Tagalog in American television? So I am very proud to say that as an undocumented immigrant, I directed and produced the film with as much Tagalog as there is airing on American television. It's really, really wonderful to be here, especially considering how there's many people here who have been real allies and real friends in the past 3 years. There's a woman named Angela Chan. She was one of the first people that you honored. Angela Chan from San Francisco. She's amazing. There's Rio Guerrero and Rose Quizon Villasor, the awesome Filipino lawyers that are friends of mine. And I have to say, there's a woman here. I came really late to this movement. There are a lot of undocumented young people, dreamers, that have been doing this far longer than I did. And one of them is here. And she's a undocumented LGBT leader who's a badass lawyer. Where's Perna? Perna Lal is sitting right over there somewhere. So Define American was born in June 2011. That was when I outed myself in the New York Times against the advice of about 27 lawyers. Well, one person whose daughter is actually here, Sharon Hing, one of my lawyers, Bill Hing, said to me that this was rebellious lawyering, that he was going to protect me and it was going to be rebellious lawyering. And I have to tell you that in the past 3 years, I've done about 350 events in 44 states and visited 150 colleges. My name is Jose Antonio Vargas. I look like this. I'm gay. I'm undocumented. In college, I majored in African American Studies and Political Science. When you're in Alabama, that's a big question mark, all of that. And throughout this cross-country journey, I've asked myself, how do we preach beyond the choir? How do we connect the struggles of undocumented Americans to white and black Americans, and also to Latinos and Asians who may be hostile, apathetic, or indifferent? How do we engage young students whose energy are crucial to every movement? How do we transcend the toxic partisan politics of the moment, welcome Arizona, and grow a civil rights movement? How do we use all forms of media and the power of the narrative to change culture and transcend politics? So I'm a journalist, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller. I traffic in empathy. There isn't anybody that I don't think I can love once I hear their story. And for us at Define American, this name, calling it Define American, not Define Immigrant, not Define Filipino Lumpiat, not define, to me, calling it Define American is claiming something that many people, the same people who call us illegals and criminals, don't even think is ours. Calling ourselves Americans and claiming America, to me, underscore how interwoven our lives are. From the day laborers, to the college students, to the people who serve your food at restaurants, to the people that make sure your kids are taken care of, how interwoven our lives are to this country. To me, calling our group Define American is not some form of blind patriotism. It's actually the opposite. It's asking the question, how do you define American, that is at the core of our conversation on immigration and citizenship in an America that is undergoing an unprecedented demographic shift. For me, I find asking this question, how do you define American, as a form of patriotism. At Define American, for us, politics is culture. We cannot change the politics of immigration until we change the culture in which we talk about immigration and undocumented immigrants. To me, as a gay man, the trajectory of the LGBT rights movement in the past 15 years is really instructive. The way we talk about LGBT people had to shift, especially in media and popular culture, before the politics of LGBT issues change. Can you imagine the march towards same-sex marriage without Ellen DeGeneres? That was on the cover of Time magazine in April 1997. Can you imagine LGBT rights without Will and Grace? Will and Grace came on air in 1998 and became the #1 rated television show in America. A year later, in 1999, gay-straight alliances were formed in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, where I'm from. And for me, for every Will, there's a Grace. There's the straight best friend, right? The straight coworker, the straight neighbor, the straight classmate, the straight relative who's advocating for that LGBT person. So how do we transfer that and translate that to immigrant rights? How do we get more allies? Not just Asians, not just Latinos, but black people and white people. So actually, the same year that gay-straight alliances were formed in the Bay Area, I outed myself in front of my US history class while watching a documentary on Harvey Milk. And I have to tell you, I just couldn't be in the closet about two things at once, so I had to get out of one of them. And the film documented is actually about this coming out process. So this is my fake green card. This is the green card that my grandfather, my lolo, who was a security guard, my lolo made maybe $8, no more than $8 his whole life. But to get me here, he saved up $4,500 to pay for this fake green card. Now, you're probably wondering, why didn't he just petition me? Well, it's not considered a close enough of a relationship for a grandfather to petition a grandchild, so I couldn't come here legally. My mother was denied a visa, a tourist visa and an actual visa. So that's why he decided that he was gonna get me here. I was gonna come here, I was gonna work under the table jobs, and then I was gonna marry a woman, and then I was gonna get legal. And I told him I was gay. And I have to tell you, I hated this green card. I hated that my life cost $4,500. I was ashamed that they lied and that they thought I was gonna lie with them. I didn't understand why they didn't think it through. Why didn't they call a lawyer? Right? And it wasn't until maybe I was in my mid to late 20s that I started realizing, how dare I question what they did? How dare I judge them? Right? How dare I not acknowledge and respect the sacrifice that it took for a Filipino man to come to America on a family unification visa, to learn to speak English by watching Cheers and naming himself after Ted Danson, and having the audacity to get his grandson here. So in honor of my grandfather who died 5 years ago, the very thing that I was ashamed of, that I hated, is now in the middle of this poster for this film. And let's talk about shame. Let's talk about not speaking up. Let's talk about not taking a risk. I think, since I am among my Asian American brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles, I can be honest in saying there's a lot of that in our community. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of, we don't talk about that. We don't air out dirty laundry like that. I remember once I did an event at UT Austin in Texas, and after I gave my little talk thing, this Asian woman comes up, and she was shaking. She was shaking. Finally, I grabbed her, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" Korean woman, got here when she was 5. She's been undocumented, for, I think at that point, 16 years. Her parents owns dry cleaning, 2 dry cleaning businesses near Austin. And her parents, she said, are just terrified. Terrified. So terrified that it's become paralyzing, not just to them, but also for her. I think about her a lot. And I think about our community and what we need to kind of grapple with, right? And how we can talk about this issue. And I think about how much we don't know about this issue. So, at a risk of being like a total journalist, I just want to give some facts, because sometimes that's lacking in this conversation. This past summer, Vice News interviewed the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration, and the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration said that 7.3 million undocumented workers work in the United States and pay Social Security using their fake or not real numbers, like I did. And guess what? According to him, we actually paid $100 billion in the past decade into the Social Security Fund. This was just announced in August. Have you guys heard this in the New York Times? Have you heard anything about this at all? Another fact, since we are in Arizona, bed quota. Did you know that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which used to be called INS, has a bed quota that they have to hold? Is a congressional mandate for ICE to hold an average of 34,000 individuals in detention on a daily basis. So someone, as we're sitting here right now, is probably driving on the freeway without a driver's license, who's undocumented, who probably has family here, probably has US citizen kids here. And because of Governor Brewer, bless her heart, this person is probably gonna get arrested if they get pulled over, and before you know it, that person is gonna be in a detention center. Who do you think pays, by the way, for these detention centers? Your taxpayer money. And who do you think, by the way, profits for this? Private corporations. And to me, this is a really, really important fact. An estimated 17 million people in the United States live in households where at least one person is an undocumented immigrant. We call them mixed status families. When I had the privilege of testifying in front of the United States Senate, it was at the Judiciary meeting, Senator Hirono, the wonderful Senator Hirono, was actually there. And she actually acknowledged the mixed status family issue and how that is very much interwoven with how Asian American immigrant families deal with this issue. So this is my family. That's a picture of my grandfather in the middle. This is the day he left the Philippines. He was able to come here because his sister petitioned him. He waited for a few years, and then he got here. Then my grandmother followed, and all of my so out of all of those people in that picture, I'm the only one who's undocumented. And that's the reality in a lot of undocumented households in America. As you know, according to census data, Asian Americans are the fastest growing immigrant population in the United States. We've grown 50% in the past decade. Almost half of all immigrants in the United States, 18.2 million, came from Asia. Did you know that about 74% of Asian American adults are immigrants and were born abroad? And for us, family sponsorship is the most common way we get to this country, like my grandparents did. But because of our broken and outdated immigration system, right now there are about 1.8 million Asian family-based visa applicants waiting to be reunited with their families. One of them, by the way, is my mother. People wait for decades. Immigrants from China and India for as long as 12 years. People from the Philippines for about 28 years. My mother is on a 16-year waiting list to come here. And I have to say, speaking of the Philippines, I would be remiss to not talk about my kababayans here at the National Filipino American Lawyers Association. They reminded me that today, exactly today, November 8th, the strongest storm recorded at landfall, that's Typhoon Haiyan, devastated the Philippines. Haiyan killed more than, 6,000 people, severely affecting and displacing about 1.4 million people. And exactly a year later, Filipinos in America are still waiting to be granted what's called a temporary protected status, called a TPS, by the American government. By the way, there's precedent for this. Temporary refuge and TPS has been granted to people in Japan, Haiti, El Salvador. But the Philippines, a year later, exactly today, is still waiting. I don't know what this organization can do to help us, but we need your help on that issue. I must say, by the way, so I've been traveling nonstop for the past 3 years. After the film aired on CNN, it's, by the way, on Netflix and iTunes now if you want to check it out. I was going to take a break. I've been really tired. I wanted to take a break. And then this summer, this happened. I'm sure like a lot of people in this room, the way we were talking about these kids, right, was to me incredibly frustrating. I was reading a story the other day, actually, that there was an article that said that a 3-year-old boy who arrived in the border in April 2014 this year from El Salvador had to get in front of an immigration judge without a lawyer. A 3-year-old boy with no lawyer in front of an immigration judge who has to make a decision whether or not the boy stays. So I get to Texas. Now, I've been traveling nonstop, as I said. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna fly out of your airport here in Phoenix. When I fly out of that airport, there's only one piece of ID that I have. To be undocumented means you're obsessed with pieces of documents. And my only piece of ID is my Filipino passport with no visa in it. So that's what I use to get to the TSA line. And usually I get through, hasn't been a problem. When I went to Texas, however, unlike the other airports across America, there was a Border Patrol agent sitting next to the TSA agent. So the moment I gave them my passport, my Filipino passport, the Border Patrol agent was like, "Are you here illegally?" And since I'm done lying, I said, "Yes." Lawyers are laughing. And before I know it, he put me in handcuffs. I was transferred to a detention center. When are we going to start calling these detention centers prisons? Because that's actually what they are. And the irony of it is I actually ended up being detained at the exact same cell as the kids. So I want you to imagine 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, mostly boys. There are some girls. There was a girl that I couldn't stop looking at her. She had a piece of plastic as her ponytail. And there were all these boys looking at me. I don't think they've ever seen like a tall, big Asian person before. And then whenever like the Border Patrol people said, "Jose Antonio Vargas," they all just kind of looked at me like, and I say, the only Spanish I know is "Donde está la biblioteca?" But I have to be honest with you, you don't really need language to look at these kids, to look at their eyes, and to feel a sense of moral bankruptcy. These kids were in jail, being called illegal, because we as a country are not able and have been unable to ask the hard questions. So what does U.S. foreign policy and U.S. trade agreements have to do with migration pattern? What did we do to Central American countries like Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador? Why are these kids coming here? They didn't come here to play, go to Disneyland and play PlayStation. Can you imagine the parents? The parents saying, "Go, go, go, walk." I was on a plane when I got here. These kids walked. And what do? We called them illegal. We put them in jail. And many of them don't have lawyers. Now, here's the question, and this may be sacrilegious. If these kids were from Canada, if they were white, would we have allowed that to happen? What if they were Chinese? What if they were Filipinos? What if that was your kid? What would you have done? So, this idea of defining American, to me, is very personal as a Filipino American in this country. Recently, I was asked to give a talk in North Carolina. We showed the documentary. After the speech, this gentleman got up. I said, "There's about 4 million Filipinos in America." And he said, "Why are there so many of you here?" It was late. And all I could really say, it's really, really important that we preach beyond the choir. So we've been doing at Define American as many Republican and Tea Party events as we can. So all I could say to the gentleman was, "Sir, we are here because you were there. That's why we're here. The Spanish-American War? The Philippines is the first Iraq? as the first occupied territory. And then, I don't want to sound like an open history book, but then I started talking about the fact that the very first Filipino settlement in the United States was in Louisiana, in a fishing village, in 1763, 2 years before the American Revolution. So actually, we were here before you were here. One of the greatest ironies of being undocumented is knowing that your life is subjected to and limited by pieces of papers. Yet, all the while, you have to muster enough energy to tell yourself and to know that you are more than pieces of papers. You got to tell yourself you are not this illegal person that society says that you are, and you got to tell yourself you have a right to be here. Now, don't mistake me. I want immigration reform to happen. We all should. I want driver's license for undocumented people. Undocumented students should have access to education. We need to stop the needless and inhumane detention and deportation and separation of families. We need to stop thinking of this whole model minority, good immigrant versus bad immigrant. We need a path to citizenship so we can fully participate in this democracy. But you and I both know that passing immigration reform, whenever that may be, in whatever form it may take, is not a political panacea. Finally, giving us pieces of papers doesn't necessarily mean that we will be seen and accepted as full human beings. What? We're 50 years into the Voting Rights Act, and what is happening all across this country to African Americans and Latinos and immigrants? Politics can't fix all of that. Culture can. To me, at Define American, integrating the narratives of Latinos, the largest minority group, and Asians, the fastest growing racial group, in a changing country that is still mostly defined by a black or white binary is a cultural challenge that requires a sustainable strategy and a long-term investment. We have to tell our stories. We need to tell them who we are. And it doesn't mean just having pad thai and lumpias and Chinese restaurants. It means being on television. It means being on the radio. It means being unafraid of telling people that we are here and that we have a right to be here. My next film project, I'm very excited to announce, is actually going to be on whiteness in America. What it means to be young and white in post-Obama America. Because, we always get asked where we're from. And I think it's really important that we turn the table and ask white people, where are you from? White is not a country. How did you get here? What oceans did you cross? What papers did you need? What was the sacrifice? Do you know it? Do you value it? And what are you going to do with it? For people like us, America isn't something that you just kind of lands in your lap. It's something you have to earn. So how many people here have driver's licenses? Can you raise your hand? Make sure you hug it, you kiss it, you frame it. How many people here are American citizens? Can you raise your hand? Okay, wait, I'm gonna take a photo. No, stop. Raise your hand. Now, here's my question to all of you. What are you going to do to help us? What are you going to do, and will continue to do, because you have been allies so far, to insist on these hard, uncomfortable conversations? Martin Luther King said that history will record that in this period of great transition, the greatest tragedy is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. Silence is no longer acceptable. Thank you very, very much. It's really an honor to be here.